It's the land that time forgot. We forgot about it, they forgot about us, and they carried on like time stood still. We take a journey back to the 1820s, and we don't just see 1820s attitudes, we see 1720s attitudes, and we go even further back as we explore colonialism 2024 with Infidel 64.
Thank you, Phoebe. For centuries, Indigenous people have faced relentless oppression and erasure of their cultural practices, often justified by the white supremacist nature of colonization and Christianity. Historical policies sought to suppress Native American rituals and impose a Eurocentric worldview, framing Indigenous traditions as primitive or even sinful. This enduring legacy of discrimination and cultural genocide continues today as Indigenous communities struggle to preserve their heritage against systemic forces aiming to obliterate it. As we delve into this stark reality, buckle up. We're heading into a mindset more suitable for the 1820s, not today. This story is from The Guardian by Nicole Ocarin on June 24, 2024.
So, does no one here sense the hypocrisy of this article of a group of Christians turning around and saying that all these ceremonies that they're doing are, blasphemous and devil worship and all, when the Lutherans themselves are engaged in ceremonies and all manners of things, and the hypocrisy of this just stinks. It's my ceremonies, not yours. Mm-hmm. It's my way or the highway. It's Christo-fascism on steroids. It's Andrew Jackson and, his March of Tears coming all back again. He was such a wonderful man, Andrew Jackson. He was such a wonderful president. But anyway, I digress from my dislike of Andrew Jackson as president of the United States, and I just have to ask, who the fuck are these school administrators to say what the fuck somebody does when they're not in school?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's insane. I think I grew up uber religious here in the South, and you're conditioned to tell everybody what the fuck to do. And you tell them what to do no matter where they're at. I had to pull my kid from school, from public school. And I hate this because we recently did an episode on the issue with private schools here in Texas. Sadly, I had to pull my child from public school because it is so saturated with religio fascist-y bullshit that when my kid told their peers that they don't believe in a God, that evolution is a fact, and that and that they're queer. They were labeled a Satanist. They were told they were a devil worshiper. They were told that they, quote, love the devil and respect the devil. And it got to the point to where they were getting physically attacked, death threats, were being told that they were going to get jumped. School administrators knew about it and did nothing. So now it's sad because generally people go to private schools for them to be kind of inundated with like a religious structure. We had to find a private school that was very progressive and that is very open to people and things like, women's rights, civil rights, access to abortion, queer people, trans people, all the boxes that we all check. So I think it's disgusting, but it's also par for the course. I guess I'm just used to it. It's no different than what we're used to every day. So the idea that these people can like overreach into people's outside personal lives is no different than the sodomy laws we used to have here in Texas. Like, who the fuck are you to tell me what I can stick inside a wear or do whatever? That's insane. I'm not harming anybody.
It also has this paternalistic bullshit where they have inserted themselves as loco parentis in all aspects of these children's lives because they know best. And how dare you question this? So these are Indian reservations. I use the term Indian here not as a slur, but because that is the term that is used legally. It's the Department of Indian Affairs, so I will continue to use that. If there are strong objections to that, please email below. But as someone who uses that term in a legal context, I will use it in this context. It is not designed as a slur. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs do run schools for what is native Indian tribal land in America. And this is something that is a bit of an odd situation here, because missionaries and everything moved onto these lands to, quote, civilize the tribes that were here before they were. The Dawes Act, for example, drive Studebaker wagons, live in houses and drink whiskey. Whiskey was really great for the culture there because it made everyone alcoholic in the end. And what amazes me is that these church-run schools believe they have a right to indoctrinate over the other religions that are there. On this show, we talk about religious freedom. We talk about religious tolerance. We're not just atheism here. If you don't like someone else's religion, you are slitting your own throat for your own religion if you suppress that religion.
Yep.
Simply turning around and saying, we want to eliminate that religion, gives someone else the right to turn around to you and say, they have the right to eliminate your religion. And the way that the Indian tribes were treated historically in America was disgusting. The Trail of Tears, the ignoring of treaty after treaty after treaty, just so that they could be leveled by pioneers in the name of manifest destiny. What it was manifest genocide.
You know, I recently finished the book Blood Meridian, and it just can't help but remind me of that book. And, you know, Cormac McCarthy really painted a good picture. I say good. Painted a very vivid picture of what we did. And this is just another extension of that, you know. I'm sorry, Infidel, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was what Phoebe was saying made me think of that. It's just, we're continuing the same elimination of culture, but in a much more subversive, a much more implicit type of way, and in a way that we've accepted as a society. We have accepted the authority of Christians. So Christians. You look at we were having a conversation earlier about Ted Bundy. You know, people like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. I always bring it up. I don't know why I always talk about these guys on these podcasts. Yeah, and I bring this up every time. The way they were able to,
let's throw him into the mix. Why don't we throw him in? Well,
but Dahmer. But there's a reason I'm bringing Dahmer, but I will in a second. The reason I bring in those two guys and Dennis Rader. I always bring up these three guys for whatever reason, because they were able to use their standing in the church to hide in plain sight. We automatically grant a moral authority to somebody who's Christian because we have been inculcated to think that way. Irrespective. Yes, exactly. So in this situation, the reason nobody's like screaming about it and breaking down doors is because it's accepted. I don't know, Infidel, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. I'll throw it to you.
No worries. But, you know, one thing I wanted to say is that Phoebe was talking about the hypocrisy of them talking about these pagan rituals. The reality is that Christianity is filled with rituals that they stole from older cultures that are pagan.
The fucking pagans. Yeah, man.
Yes,
I mean, Jesus Christ.
They literally, I mean, Christmas, when you look at it, is loaded with pagan imagery, as most of the other holidays are. And, you know, but when you look at this case in particular, you know, you look at the situation of how these people and the Lutheran Church here are talking about pagan worship and demonizing these children for what they've done. You know, it goes even further than that, because you know, there are people. There was one case for one woman. Her children were not allowed to return to the school the next year because she was involved in some type of indigenous ritual. So they penalized her children. Yes, they penalized the children for this. One of the other kids, one of the ones that's in this group of 3 who got in trouble for this particular sunrise dance in the first place, they did a project and they had the White Mountain Apache crest on it, and she got an F for depicting pagan worship. So this, I do think, though, that we are seeing an example of, as Jason mentioned, the normalcy of Christianity being the dominant religion. Make this even worse. We're putting the 10 Commandments in schools in Louisiana and other states, and because that's normal, that's what we're supposed to do. One of the co-sponsors made the comment when they asked about what about children who aren't Christian, they're like, well, just don't look at it. And so that is a dismissive attitude that we're seeing here, because these people, they actually think that they are reaching out and saving these poor, and hate to say it this way, but it's what they're acting like. We're going to save the savage. We're going to get the savage out of them, and we're going to make them good, proper white people. Gross. Because that's what it comes across. Because at the end of the day, you mentioned them being out of school. That's what they want. They don't want to change you in school. They don't want to make you be something they want you to be in school. They want to change who you are. And that is what we see time and time again with Christianity being a dominant force. It's not enough to make you smile and go along and go with the flow while you're here in front of us, but they want to change the way you think, the way you behave, and literally who you are as a person.
It's a subjugation of will. That's the thing.
Yes.
Christianity at its core is a religion where you sacrifice your own will, your own desires, your own preferences, the things that make you tick as a human being. And what they're seeing with these children and with this community are people who are exercising their will devoid of these pieces of crap telling them what to do, and they can't have it. And it's disgusting, because they would rather have these children out of school. They would rather have these people uneducated. They would rather penalize them and punish them for not falling in line, rather than edify them and help them become strong.
We see the extremes of this in
citizens.
other parts of the world. We see the extremes of this in other parts of the world. Look at Afghanistan, where women do not get a secondary or higher education because they want to keep them in line.
Yep.
And the easiest way to do that is to keep people ignorant.
Yes.
They want these Lutheran church schools are the tip of the iceberg of white acculturation of American Indian tribes. It has been going on so long that it has become normal in American legal, cultural, and other aspects of society. Because when Britain turned up, when the Dutch turned up, they generally didn't give a monkey's about the natives. They were just like, fine, we'll leave you over there. I mean, just look at the war at the Battle of River Raisin, when you had the British on the same side as the tribes, and you had the French on the same side as the Americans. The British and the Dutch who turned up were not the issues. It was those with the religious bent that decided that manifest destiny was the way forward, and manifest destiny was what was going to be done, and we were going to manifest it across this whole continent from ocean to ocean, and it didn't matter who got in our way, because those pioneers, they had that land and it was their land, and it didn't matter who was there to start with. And it's exactly the same nonsense today with the sovereignty of the tribes being undermined again and again and again, because these churches have been there for a while, and because the Bureau of Indian Affairs schools are seen as not being of a high enough quality. That screams that they're getting away with things they really shouldn't be getting away with, and it shouldn't be allowed. And it tells you the level that the Department of Interior gives to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Indian Affairs Department of Education. That is what needs looking at. You shouldn't be having a separate Department of Education just because they're children of Native Americans, of Indian tribes. You shouldn't be having that. It should be one unified education system across the country. You shouldn't be having this three-tier education system where you have these top-tier schools that hoover up all of the money, these schools that are infiltrated by Ryan Walters and co, and then you have these other schools that are Bureau of Indian Affairs schools that seem to be at the very bottom of the heap.
No, well, I agree, because what we're seeing is a separate but equal. We're seeing blacks and whites only still. And what happens is, and this really stood out to me, is that if you keep people poor and ignorant and uneducated and more or less ostracized, you're creating stigma. Stigma is a self-perpetuating psychological state after a while, and you keep perpetuating that stigma. And if people are marginalized and they're treated as others, they're seen not as humans. You can't help but see it that way. They're dehumanized.
We don't just see it when it comes to this group. We see it with every other group that isn't white, cisgendered, heteronormative, certain kind of correct Christian.
Yes, no, I agree. I do agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. Infidel's seen it in Louisiana, and in moving to Texas, I know you've seen it. I've seen it growing up too.
It's and and I think that in the last 15, 20 years, it's gotten a lot worse. In the last 4 years, it's gotten a lot worse. And when you look at people, you mentioned Phoebe, you mentioned Ryan Walters in Oklahoma. That is part of the problem, because they're openly what they used to say and try to skim along the edge to sneak in what they want to sneak in. Now they're openly saying it. I mean, Ryan Walters is saying, hey, we're going to put the Bible in every class. We're going to make sure the Bible's taught everywhere, that the Bible is the standard that we're going to do everything by. So when you have this even happen,
I have to ask him which version.
Well, I mean that, and of course,
the New International Version, the King James Version, the
Catholic version.
Which version?
But see, that's the problem. And that's one thing that a lot of Christians don't understand, is that when they hear this, they go, they get on board. All those school shootings happened after we took prayer out of the schools, and they make up all these nonsensical things that in their head sounds good inside of their echo chamber. But what most often they forget is that ultimately, when the Christians come into power, and we do have a theocracy in this country, who decides who's Christian enough? Because we saw 300 years of war in Europe where everyone decided, well, it's us, and no, it's not you, it's me. And then that sectarian violence is something we're going to
crying out loud.
Yes, we're going to see that brought back if we're not careful. Right now, what we're seeing is just the continuation and an escalation of what's been going on for hundreds of years in the Native community. But we also should be able to look at that and say, you know what? That's the canary. That's the canary that should be telling us that this problem is getting emboldened, and these people are getting worse and worse because they are more and more convinced that they're right. And not only are they more convinced they're right, but while they used to be on the fringe and they used to be on the outside and they used to be just trying to work in there with, let's do creationism, okay, well, intelligent design, and they were trying to inch their way in. Now they're saying, you know what? Forget all that. Let's just bring the Bible in. Let's just bring in this, and let's just be open about it. So when we're seeing this in mainstream education, you can forget it on the people that they don't give a shit about anyway. Let's be honest. They don't give a damn about people of color. They don't give a damn about the indigenous people in this country. You mentioned the third-class educational system. Well, they don't give a shit about it. So if we're going to amp up Christianity, because like some of these parents said, we send our kids to these schools because it gives them a better opportunity. And so that is a poor reflection on their original options of schools. But
there you go.
Yes. And when you see that, and they're going to this and dealing with this, continuing to deal with this, because this is not a new problem, it's only going to get worse, and it's only going to be greater numbers of people. And the Christians themselves, like you mentioned, the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Latter-day Saints or the group I was raised in, they should be paying attention, because if they were, they'd realize that one day you're going to be on the out, and you're going to be the ones that are pagans. You're going to be the thems. You're going to be the one that's othered.
Yep.
It's like the TV show and the book, The Handmaid's Tale, is supposed to be a work of fiction. Worryingly, it is getting closer and closer to being a premonition of reality. There are religions there that are so extreme when it was written that it was deemed to be outlandish and could be got away with. If you wrote that book today and you released it, it would be too close to the bone to be able to be released in the way that it was without it causing consternation and, controversy of the wazoo, because it envisages the United States of America devolving into a unitary theocracy where a certain sect of Christianity at its most extreme literalist interpretation runs America, and every other sect of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, atheism, paganism is all off by the wayside. It's all in the bin. And there's a scene in the TV show of the judicial system in the Republic of Gilead, which is the country that takes over from the United States. And they have these two women who have had an affair with each other, and they don't get an offense. And the only evidence entered in is they read a passage from the Bible, and the judge says, "Do you swear on the Bible it's true?" Yes, they're convicted. Hang her, put her back over there. That is not a reality I ever want to live in. And you shouldn't want to live in it either. And if you don't want to live in that reality, tell us in the comments below.